So, Randy, let's shift gears a little bit here. Tell our good viewers here, yeah, what are you currently doing for a living?
I still teach at Science Park High School. So it's my 17th year or 18th year, 17th year. I don't remember. Anyway, I teach social studies and I teach in the International Baccalaureate program. So I get to teach some really cool classes. Theory of knowledge and global politics and IB philosophy and all these things that are very adjacent to the debate world. But yeah, really love it. And I also am the coordinator for the extended essay program. So in a couple of weeks, I'll be collecting 18 4,000 word essays. So that'll be fun. But I have to kind of coach these kids to do their 2-year essay project for the IB, which is it's basically like a master's level paper. It's like a 4,000 word essay on a selected in-depth topic that they're studying. So I'm still teaching at Science Park. Been around forever. I just haven't really coached debate there since my son was born. So I've only been loosely involved in the debate world. Occasionally I'll help out with tabbing some tournaments for a league that is in New York City. And once in a while I've had some tutoring students where I'll, meet with kids 1 hour a week and, help them with some of their cases.
Okay.
But yeah, I haven't been involved in full-time coaching. I was actually doing weddings for a while. I was DJing and doing music for weddings for a while, but a lot of those gigs have kind of dried up. But I had, some other side jobs besides coaching debate full-time. But yeah, I've always been a teacher. My wife's a teacher in Newark, so it's her father was a teacher in Newark, so we're like, pretty.
So it's like a whole lineage situation.
It's a vocation
Okay.
more than a job. Yes.
Got it. So wait. Before I even move anywhere forward, you have to tell us what was your DJ name, or what is your DJ name?
I didn't really. I mean, I was doing wedding DJs, so it was nothing like club parties or anything. We were just. I would get hired, and it was usually my friend's music company. So I just kind of ran the wheels. But it was nothing too fun. No, I didn't really have a DJ name.
We gotta, viewers, we have to get Randy a DJ name. That would be
well, I have a SoundCloud. It's Randolph Mitchell, and you could check it out. It's some of my original music. So I'm actually sitting at, I have my some of my headphones and recording gear behind me, but I've been involved in music my whole life, and I've recorded a bunch of my own original music. So that's and so I had a little bit of hip hop, a little bit of singer-songwriter, acoustic stuff, and I've kind of dabbled in a lot of different kinds of music. But yeah, you could, if you want to check out my SoundCloud, it's just my name, Randolph Mitchell from Newark. So
all right, we will definitely make sure the viewers get that information. That'll be really cool. Reshifting gears, if you will, right? With school being 100% online this year, right? How have you, or for some people, we'll say, how have you been affected by this pandemic, if at all?
Well, I've gained like 15 pounds.
Right.
But no, we've been holed up in my house since March, and I have a 4-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. And my wife is a teacher, a 6th grade teacher at Wilson Avenue School in Newark. So it's definitely been a challenge because my wife actually made little classroom corners for my kids. And so my son is on all remote learning while, you know, my wife is trying to teach, and typically she's like downstairs with him, and then I'm upstairs with my daughter who doesn't have any remote instruction. So I'm trying to balance like teaching and all the other responsibilities of grading and lesson plans and all the kind of you know, just the daily demands of teaching with being full-time childcare. And my
Mhm.
daughter is constantly like yanking on my elbow while I'm trying to teach and asking for this, or saying she's hungry, or her belly hurts, or she needs activities too. So we have to come up with like activities that she can do where she's learning. And you know, I don't want her just having a completely unstructured day. So just trying to balance all that has been a challenge, and that's been the hardest part for me. And you know, actually, honestly, one of the hardest parts too is just that it's a different kind of getting to know students. Half the time I'm only seeing their foreheads. You know, they kind of have this like camera looking
Yeah.
up thing.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of students that I've met with in office hours one-on-one, and I'm like, I don't even really know how the student looks. You know, and I've talked to them a bunch of times. I've read their writing. I've even gotten some, they've shared some really intimate things with me. You know, in theory of knowledge, we have the opportunity to do self-authoring kind of assignments. And so I've had students like very courageously share some really intimate things with me, but I still feel like I don't know them that well because I don't see them every day. I don't get to talk to them in the hallways or on the way out of class. I don't get to ask them to hang around for a little bit after school and develop those kind of personal bonds. So while I've had a lot of one-on-one office hours meetings, and I try to do that daily, it's just there's a kind of there's a bit of a disconnect where I feel like I don't know them as well as I would like to. And that's been one of the most challenging parts, even emotionally. But and additionally, it's also been challenging pedagogically. Just like, you know, I'm not 100% sure how to tap into, you know, where they are to try to bring them someplace else. You know, to try to introduce them to the learning content. It's a little harder to tell, you know, where they are exactly. You know, what kinds of things they're interested in, and um, there's just this weird distance through the online medium.
Yeah.
So that's been really the hardest part, is being full-time childcare while trying to teach, but also having that kind of distance between the teacher and student is challenging. But what I will say is I've had like perfect attendance this entire year. You know, I'm really lucky with the groups that I have in the IB program. So while some of them are slacking a little bit, for the most part, I have really ambitious students who are trying hard, and that just, you know, it makes it so much more rewarding in a sense for teachers than, whereas my wife has so many more students than I have, and a lot of them just aren't even logging on, and that's just so frustrating. And you end up having to spend so much time trying to chase down these students who really aren't like participating, and that causes a lot of stress and frustration. So I'm very, very thankful for my situation. As much of a kind of burden of preparation I have multiple subjects, and I have this extended essay project. It's a lot of work to do that. I'm thankful that my kids are working hard, so it makes it, you know, so much more easy to motivate myself. You know, to be like, these kids need you, and they're busting their tails, so I got to get in there and do the job right. You know.
Yes, no, of course, of course. I definitely understand. And I surely share that sentiment of always looking at foreheads on screens, the whole face.
Right.
I don't know if it says something about the generation. I don't know. That's like a deeper conversation for another show. However, I did want to quickly get your opinion on online tournaments, right? Do you think this will be something that will be the new norm moving forward? And do you think it could possibly open doors to more international interaction and debate?
So this is a great question. What I fear is that two things I would fear about it becoming the norm. One is, as I said before, some of the best bonds that you build with the debaters, and with, as a debater with other debaters, and with your coach, and as a coach with your students, is in traveling and in, you know, going to these tournaments physically together and experiencing it and being there with them. And I would think that there'd be some important part of the experience that's lost in that. and even just like being in the award ceremony physically is so different than being on like a Zoom award ceremony, right?
Oh, yes.
Where people are putting up the little emoji claps and everything.
Or you hear the automated.
Right, right.
Yes, they all sound the same.
It's not the same as being physically in an award ceremony. So
Mhm.
there are those parts that are lost. The challenge with putting together like an international competition or even having debaters from California come to your Zoom tournament is with the different time zones. Sometimes it can be challenging to kind of get everybody aligned and not create scheduling problems. And one thing that I found, and I've only had a little bit of experience with tabbing an online tournament, um, but students can just walk away. Or judges. Oh God, I had like 12 judges drop out in one round and just be like, "Oh, I'm having technical problems," or "I have a family emergency," or something. And it's like you don't have any way of saying like, "Oh, yeah." You don't have any way of questioning the excuse or anything, and people can
Yeah.
just walk away from the computer. So there can be some problems with technical issues and everything, but it does create a lot of convenience where people can do it from their homes and not have to be on a bus at a certain time, and so that way it can actually create some more opportunities. So there's some real advantages where you can do a kind of international tournament and have people from all over come to a tournament wherever, and that opens up access. Um, but there are some possibilities of technical problems and glitches, and some of the platforms have some weird things that could happen if you put a setting wrong and suddenly like everything goes wrong. Uh, but my biggest concern about not having tournament in a physical space would just be that the experience is different, and I'm not sure that you'd get the full range of rewards socially and kind of in terms of relationships and the emotional reward of being there. And certainly with traveling tournaments, traveling with the debate team is a huge experience, and it's a really great bonding experience. It's a great social emotional experience, and it's also an opportunity for young people to get away from their families and be independent
Yeah.
and have some time on their own.
Yeah.
And they're in this shared struggle together with other kids their age, and that can be a really, really distinctive and rewarding experience that I hope doesn't get lost. But I think that there are some serious advantages to doing it digitally as well. It's definitely much more convenient, and maybe could open access for some kids who would have a lot of trouble because maybe they don't have the kind of system set up in their life, the structures in their life that make it easy for them to get to a school at 6:30 in the morning to get on the bus, or maybe they have to catch a bus, and it becomes really difficult for them. So being able to do it from home might be better for some of those students. And then of course you have some students who don't have the same degree of technology and might be disadvantaged over a digital tournament as well, just because they don't have a really expensive computer or their internet connection's unreliable. For things outside of their control can impact their actual experience in the debate tournament. So I'd be concerned about those things, but I don't think that those are reasons necessarily to not do digital tournaments at all. I would just hate to see the experience of a physical tournament kind of get pushed to the wayside for efficiency reasons. I think you're missing out on something if you don't have those physical tournaments.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. So our last shifting of the gears of this night, right? So tell us, what are you currently reading, if anything?
So right now, the book that I've been working on, and I've actually been working this year with I have an independent study student for AP US History. So the book we're reading together is called Newark: Race, Rights, and Riots,
Ooh.
by, I think the guy's name is Michael Furman. But it's essentially a history of Newark through the lens of all the inequality issues that led up to the riots in the 60s and some of those issues that still persist beyond the 1968 riots. So I'm pretty hip deep in that book right now. So we've gotten through like 100 pages so far. So that's the main thing I'm reading. I was reading another book for global politics called The End of Power by Moises Naim, which is about just how technology is changing decision-making power in the world, whether it's through CEOs or government leaders or anything. And his thesis is kind of about how power is kind of easier to obtain now, but it's much harder to kind of hold on to, and it doesn't really buy you as much as it once did. But yeah, other than that, I've probably just been consuming a lot of news. Obviously, I'm definitely doom scrolling a lot with the the state of the world, the craziness that's going on in the world. But yeah, in terms of books, that's the one I've been focused on the most, is that Kevin Mumford book. I think the author's name is Kevin Mumford, but it's called Newark: Race, Rights, and Riots, and it's about basically a history of all the different kind of socioeconomic conditions that characterized Newark throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and the unique situations faced by the underclass, as he calls them, basically the Black people that were living in the really blighted communities in the Central Ward, especially, and how, his basic argument is that Black people were basically excluded from the public sphere. They weren't really allowed to participate in public life, in government, and in positions of leadership, and how even when they tried to participate in labor unions, they were often faced kind of discrimination. And that's what led the civil rights movement, what contributed to leading to the civil rights movement becoming more militaristic and more separatist, and less kind of, in the vision of Martin Luther King, unifying and kind of assimilation into society, as opposed to the kind of Marcus Garvey vision of having a separate society.
Yes, no, I understand, and I think I feel to myself I love like Newark information like that, history and understanding the city, because I think the story of Newark is such an interesting one for this historic major American city, right? That could have been just as big as a Manhattan, as a Chicago, right? Newark isn't as big in that sense due to a lot of those reasons that I think are probably covered in that book, and I think it can explain to some folks how Newark is the way it is now. It didn't just happen, right? There aren't just people who decided we didn't care about this. You know what I mean? The riots is not the answer to everything. There were things that happened prior to the riots, during the riots, and post riots, right? And so, or even if you call it a riot, right? Some folks call it a rebellion, depending on who you are in the city and where you were at that, where your understanding of the history is, right? And so that is a book I need to pick up for myself, because that sounds great.
I have it up.
But I also think people really need to take, I think a lot of people need to take the time to read that, because I think that will shape or reshape the misinformation that they have always been given or have consumed about Newark, and those of us from Newark and who live, work, here in the city, and what that means. And I think that's also why, there's so many of us who are that have such a strong pride to say that we are from Newark, because we understand the history in its totality and what that means. It's not like we're not just looking at what you see down the street, right? It's more to it, right? There's a history behind it. But anyway, but before we leave, is there anything else you think is important for the debate community in Newark to keep in mind moving forward in this new era?
That's a great question. I would, I think that the Newark debaters that I know are definitely getting a heavy dose of exposure to critical theory and a lot of performance debate that I've seen. And a lot of them really find inspiration and find their voices through that. I always wanted to try to and maybe this prevented some success in my coaching in terms of competitive success of winning rounds and winning tournaments and everything. But my philosophy of coaching was always trying to get students exposed to a wide range of different arguments. So, I think it's important to read some of the literature that maybe you might criticize, and kind of try to see the value and the positives in some of the kind of more traditional like policy debate as well. And even though some of the arguments are patently ridiculous, I think knowing about policy gives you a kind of distinctive qualification and a skill set that is very powerful in society. And if you dismiss policy through a critical lens, then you're shortchanging something. Because it's one of my core beliefs, and it's a personal opinion, but I believe that critical theory is really super important in getting us to examine personal biases and looking at and shaping our values of unfairness and shaping society. When it comes to policy making, it can get to be a very complicated and ugly process, and sometimes requires more ability to, it requires more homework than just kind of looking through the lens of critical theory. So one of the blessings that I've had is being able to teach this class on global politics, where critical theory is a component, but it's a component that is how do I say this? It's organized into an understanding, a theoretical understanding of global politics that also looks at structures of power. It also looks at like what human rights mean kind of on paper and in theory, but like all the politics of human rights, and then looking at like economic development and trying to, the issues that people in public administration are trying to deal with. Critical theory is important in shaping our viewpoints and our values in approaching these issues, but policymaking is still also very important. And I hope that that doesn't get lost, because I've seen a lot of students have a lot of experience with the literature and critical theory, but don't have a whole lot of exposure to some of the kind of more policy oriented stuff. And I would coach to try to get students to to be exposed to that stuff also. Mm-hmm. But I mean, moving forward, I think it's doing a great job, because even if what I'm saying is true, a lot of students who really get into debate, and they might only kind of have one flavor of debate that they're really into, will often later, in their 20s, come around to seeing some of the other kinds of issues as well. And conversely, a lot of students who only learn the kind of policymaking world will come to see the more critical lenses later in their experience too. So even though students might be kind of hyper-focused on certain kind of issues in debate now, I still think it's such an invaluable experience, and that we should be trying to, spread it and let it help more and more children out there, because it really is the most empowering tool, and it's changed my life forever, for sure. And however it can continue, whether it's digital or in person, or whether it's kind of an emphasis on more of the critical issues, or it's kind of more of an emphasis on practical, pragmatic policymaking, it's all good. And I just want it all to keep going.
Wow. That was beautiful, Randy. Well, hey, sadly, that's all the time we have for today. But thank you so much, so much from us here at the Newark Debater for taking the time out of your day to come chat with us. Really, we really do appreciate it from the bottom of our hearts to be a part of this beautiful platform that we are sharing with our beautiful viewers who are loving every episode. And so definitely thank you again. But
my pleasure.
Before we go, we would like to play a game with you, because that's what we do here at the Newark Debater. We like to play a little game at the end of every show. This one's called it's called Block Book. Okay. Now, with all the recent privacy concerns surrounding social media usage and comment violations, internet trolls, and lack of boundaries online, we are going to list a few names, and you have to decide whether or not they should be allowed to have a social media page and express themselves 100% freely.
So I get to deplatform people?
Maybe. You also have to say why, and you also have to say, tell us what might one post on their page look like.
Oh gosh.
All right. So you're gonna tell us whether or not they should or should not have a page. Tell us why you came to that answer, and why give us one example of what you think their post may look like.
Okay, I'll do my best.
You ready?
Okay.
All right. First one, SpongeBob.
Oh man. I don't know why SpongeBob would be censored, but I mean, honestly, I've never watched SpongeBob before. I don't really know much about SpongeBob, but I can't think of. I tend to think of it as a relatively harmless kids show, so I'm not sure what he would say that would warrant being censored. But I don't really. I'm not familiar with the show. I'm afraid that my pop culture knowledge is probably not up to par for some of these questions.
No, you're good. You're good. Kanye West.
Oh man. I feel like people have this understanding of him that he can be kind of erratic. And with that said, he can say some really powerful things sometimes. And he's also very I get the sense from him that he is just brutally honest, even when he's having kind of contradictory thoughts, and it leads people to label him as being disturbed or something. But I think he's really struggling with his ideas, and he's an honest guy. I tend to think that censorship should apply to more of the malevolent liars, people who are spreading disinformation or at least misinformation, maybe not on purpose, but they're spreading information that they know is not 100% honest, or it's framed in a very particular way in order to manipulate people. I don't see Kanye that way. I just don't. I feel like he's an honest guy, and he's trying to figure it out, and he's confused about some things, and he's gone through some struggles, and I think he's been pretty open about that. So
Okay.
I wouldn't shut him down.
Got you. Stewie from Family Guy.
Oh my God. I haven't watched Family Guy in years and years and years. I think of like old school Stewie, being out to get his mom and that kind of thing. So yeah, I could see him as a malevolent figure potentially. So I guess if he was spreading hatred and advocating violence, which is possibly consistent with his character, then maybe that's cause for deplatforming. I mean, obviously it's different when you're talking about government regulating speech and talking about like social media regulating speech, because they are private companies, so they do kind of have the ability to kick people off without having First Amendment considerations. But yeah, Stewie could be a little bit nasty, so I think it's possible that he would say some things that could get him kicked off.
Okay. Candace Owens.
It's a tough one. The partisanship is obviously frustrating, and when somebody you just feel like, one of my sadnesses about politics, obviously I'm really, really passionate about it, is that with cable news and this 24/7 coverage, it became like this constant sports match of red team versus blue team. And when I see people who are like hyper partisan, where it's just like, go red team and the blue team are jerks, and that's their whole, I feel like every time I watch Fox News, you could just subtitle everything like, can you believe those jerks? And that's like every segment that they have. And it's true of MSNBC a lot of the time too. And I think in a democracy, we have to have more good faith conversation. And I feel like Candace Owens sometimes is just hyper partisan and unwilling to acknowledge the other side of the aisle. And I get frustrated with that kind of thing. And it's actually kind of why I quit Twitter. I'll occasionally look, I shouldn't say I quit it. I took it off my phone because I found myself like outraged and obsessing over these anonymous people's comments at like 1:30 in the morning. What am I doing?
Yeah.
Why? How is this kind of conversation productive? This kind of snarky, I'm trying to one up you, I'm trying to slam dunk on you kind of thing. And I feel like those caustic conservative pundits, similarly to some of the liberal pundits too, are often just looking to kind of slam dunk, and they're not looking to have a conversation. And I think, I don't know if I'd censor people like that, but I do think that there could be incentives on social media that would help change the kinds of conversations that we have. Like, maybe you have a button. I heard Tristan Harris say this. He's one of the Google ethics engineers, and he was talking about maybe we have a button on some social media platforms like "you changed my mind," as opposed to just like a like or a thumbs up or something, but
Mm.
incentivize people trying to have open-minded conversation as opposed to, popularity contests.
Yeah.
So that's a very complicated answer, but simple answer is probably no. But I don't like the kinds of conversations that are hyper partisan and just all about like slamming on the other side.
Okay. And because I have to, and it's so relevant for the time,
Oh, no.
Donald Trump.
Oh man. Well, I think I described my criteria pretty effectively earlier. If you are malevolently spreading untruth that will incite hatred and violence, I think that's to me, that's where free speech can't just be so simple. It can't just be absolute. There has to be responsibility.
Mm.
Um, in addition to the responsibility to listen to others, which is what makes free speech valuable. When you're using demagoguery, which I think of as deliberately manipulating people with rhetoric and emotion in order to enrich yourself or empower yourself with blatant disregard for the consequences that might happen as an effect of your demagoguery. Um, that's where democracy becomes really dangerous. And I mean, you can see that all the way back in ancient Athens. If you read some of the Plato dialogues and what happened to Socrates, and someone advocating open-minded conversation can become a criminal in that kind of world where you have malevolent people who just want to maintain power and don't want to hear the person trying to speak truth to power. So, I can't disagree with what all these platforms did. I mean, I think it's a little too late, honestly. I mean, there's these and to go off on a little bit of a tangent, just read the lawsuits. Look at the lawsuits and you'll realize that these things were lies. I mean, they're not even claiming fraud in court. You read like the Pennsylvania lawsuit and the judge asks Giuliani, is this a fraud case? And he's on audio being like, no, we're not accusing fraud. They wouldn't say those things in court because they could get punished for them. But they go out and spread these things on social media and get people into a fervor and create this like, revolutionary fantasy that we're taking the country back from this tyranny that stole our election. That's really, really dangerous stuff, and I don't think it should be underestimated. And I also think it's going to be hard to just like move on and preach unity. I mean, man,
Yeah.
the Republicans did not say that. All 8 years of Obama, it was just like obstruct, 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 and now they want unity. I mean, it's I don't want to get too hyper partisan here, but it is very frustrating, and I found especially the last couple of months with the rhetoric about the election to just be really, really damaging. And so I totally agree with him being deplatformed.
Mm. Yeah, listen, Randy, I see you and I hear you. Um, well, that's all the time we have for today. And thank you all viewers for tuning in on this great, great, great episode of the Newark Debater. And remember, if you like what you see, hey, comment, like, share. If you have any questions, suggestions, you can always email us at thenewarkdebater@gmail.com. Thanks again for tuning in and have a great time.